What if everything you've been told about the second coming is missing the most important piece? Not because it was wrong, but because it was never meant for you to find. Far from the golden gates of Jerusalem, high in the Ethiopian highlands, there is a belief, ancient, unwavering, and hidden from the Western eye. It is not a theory, not a fringe idea whispered by outsiders. It is a prophecy carried in the chants of monks, etched into stone churches, guarded by fire-lit rituals, and passed down through a lineage that claims to reach back to King Solomon himself. The belief is this: Christ will return, but not through the temples of Israel. He will return through the mountains of Africa, and Ethiopia will be the place where heaven touches earth again. And they believe the Ark of the Covenant is already there waiting. This isn't fiction. It's scripture, history, bloodline, and divine geography woven into a tapestry the West has refused to look at for centuries. Because here's the uncomfortable question. If God's presence traveled with the Ark, and the Ark left Jerusalem, did God leave too? And if so, where is he now? Stay with me, because in Part 6, we'll explore a prophecy buried so deep it was never translated into English. A prophecy from one of Ethiopia's forbidden manuscripts that may explain why the true countdown to Christ's return is not on your calendar, but on theirs. So, before we begin, I want to ask you, what if everything you believed about the end times was wrong? Type that in the comments. Let it sit with you. And if you're ready to explore the truth buried under centuries of silence, hit the like button, subscribe, and come with me. Let's begin where few dare to look. Not Jerusalem, but Ethiopia. Imagine this: a queen draped in silk and gold, riding a caravan across the burning sands, carrying questions no man had dared ask. And a king, the wisest in all the earth, waiting in the temple courts of Jerusalem. Two destinies, one ancient meeting. And from that moment, the world would never be the same. This isn't mythology. This is the foundation of Ethiopia's sacred claim. A covenant older than Rome, untouched by the Vatican, and still alive today. According to the Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's royal chronicle, written in the ancient Ge'ez language, the Queen of Sheba, called Mada, journeyed to meet King Solomon, not for trade, but for wisdom. She came seeking truth. But what she received was a covenant. She left Jerusalem pregnant with Solomon's son Menelik, a child born of royal blood and born for a divine purpose. Now pause for a moment. This child Menelik wasn't just a historical figure to Ethiopians. He was the fulfillment of prophecy, the bridge between Israel and Africa, between the Old Covenant and what they believe is the New Zion. He didn't inherit a throne. He inherited a mission. And when Menelik came of age, he returned to Jerusalem, but what he brought back changed the fate of a continent. The story goes that he took with him the Ark of the Covenant, either with Solomon's blessing or without it, depending on which scroll you read. The Ark, the holiest object in Hebrew tradition, the very seat of God's presence on earth, gone from Israel and brought to Ethiopia. Now, whether you believe the story as literal history or a living legend, you can't ignore what it represents. A spiritual relocation, a shift in divine gravity from Jerusalem to Aksum, because if the Ark of the Covenant, the throne of God, truly resides in Ethiopia, then Zion has moved. Zion, in Ethiopian tradition, is not just a hill in Jerusalem. It is the place where God chooses to dwell, and they believe he dwells with them. That's why Ethiopia doesn't just honor its connection to Israel, it embodies it. From the observance of kosher-style dietary laws, to the celebration of Old Testament festivals like Sigid, to the ancient liturgies, still chanted in the Gaia-S tongue. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church sees itself not as a branch of Christianity, but as a continuation of the covenant. And here's the part that will leave you wondering. What if God never intended Zion to stay in one place? What if he moved it quietly, intentionally, away from empire, away from corruption, into the hands of those who would protect it, not profit from it? In Part 2, we travel to that very place where a single monk in silence and solitude guards what might be the holiest object on earth. But ask yourself this before we go. If the Ark left Israel, did God leave too? What if the most sacred object in biblical history has been hidden in plain sight? Not in a museum, not in the Temple Mount, but inside a small, unassuming chapel, guarded not by armies, but by one man who will never leave its side until he dies. That's not the beginning of a novel. That's real Ethiopia. Welcome to Aksum, an ancient city that once rivaled the great empires of Rome and Persia. And in the heart of Aksum sits the church of Mariam Tayun, St. Mary of Zion. To the Western world, it may seem like just another old church, but to Ethiopians, this is the holiest ground on earth, because here they believe rests the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, that ark, the golden chest, described in Exodus 25, the one that held the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, the one said to be surrounded by angels to bring victory to armies, and to strike down those who touched it with impure hands. According to Ethiopian tradition, Menelik I, son of Solomon and Sheba, brought the ark to Ethiopia nearly 3,000 years ago, and it has never left. Today, it is watched over by a man known simply as the guardian of the ark, a monk chosen for life, consecrated through ceremony, who is never allowed to leave the chapel grounds. He eats there, he prays there, he dies there. No photos, no tourists, no priest, no patriarch, no president may enter. It's not kept behind bulletproof glass. It's not displayed for fundraising. It is hidden because it is sacred. This silence, this reverence, is what separates Ethiopia's claim from every other ark theory in the world. Hollywood says the ark was lost. Adventurers say it's buried under Jerusalem or in the caves of Qumran. But Ethiopians never searched because they never believed it was lost. They fast, they kneel, they celebrate Timkut, a festival where priests carry replicas of the ark through the streets in colorful procession, as though the real one were still present. And that's the thing, maybe it is. Even the British archaeologist Edward Ollendorff, who claimed to have once seen the ark in 1941, confessed before his death. It is no different from any medieval artifact. But others say he never saw it at all. So, we're left with a sacred paradox, an object of ultimate power protected by humility. But let's ask the deeper question. If the ark really is in Ethiopia, and it truly is the seat of God's presence, then why hasn't the world paid attention? Is it possible that divine things were never meant for display? And more importantly, if God's presence traveled with the ark, then has God already moved on from the temples we keep building? In Part 3, we'll follow that question into Ethiopia's most mysterious secret of all. A calendar that doesn't just count time differently, it may be counting down. What if we've been counting time wrong this whole time? Think about it. The Bible speaks of appointed times, sacred festivals, jubilee years, and divine calendars. But what if the Gregorian calendar, the one you follow every day, isn't just off by a few years? What if it's misaligned with prophecy itself? Welcome to Ethiopia, where time doesn't tick according to Rome, but according to Revelation. The Ethiopian calendar runs roughly 7 to 8 years behind the Western Gregorian system. At first glance, it may seem like a mere historical footnote, but to the Ethiopian Church, this isn't a clerical quirk. It's a spiritual stand, because their calendar is rooted not in papal edits or imperial decree, but in ancient interpretations of the Book of Enoch Jubilees and the GZ Scriptures. It's a calendar that has never been reformed, never bent to empire or enlightenment. It marks not just the passage of time, but the rhythm of the divine. In Ethiopia, time is not linear. It's sacred. Each year corresponds to a saint. Each day has its liturgy. And every 50 years, a jubilee, a time of divine release and return, comes not as metaphor, but as cosmic alignment. Now consider this. Many Ethiopian theologians believe that Christ's return will align not with the Gregorian date of Easter, but with an Ethiopian Jubilee year, a sacred window when heaven and earth fall into rhythm once again. Why? Because in the Ethiopian tradition, God does not operate on Caesar's clock. He keeps his own time. Ecclesiastes 3:21 says, "To everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under the heaven." But if we're living out of sync with God's appointed time, how would we ever recognize the season we're in? Could that be why the rest of the world is spiritually asleep, while Ethiopia has remained liturgically awake? When Haile Selassie addressed the League of Nations in 1936, he didn't just speak as a ruler. Many believed he was speaking on God's timeline, a timeline that the Western world simply did not understand. And to this day, Ethiopians continue to observe feasts and fasts on days that heaven supposedly watches most closely. They have not forgotten the time of Enoch, the time of Jubilee, the time of return. But here's the mystery. If Ethiopia has preserved sacred time, and that time is now reaching its completion, what exactly are we counting down to? In Part 4, we'll go deeper into that mystery, because Ethiopia's role in the end times isn't just about dates. It's about pain, exile, and purification, and how centuries of suffering may have prepared this land not for judgment, but for redemption? What if the greatest preparation for glory is suffering? Not the kind that breaks a people, but the kind that forges them in fire. Because if Ethiopia's claim to divine destiny seems bold, it's not rooted in wealth or conquest or empire. It's rooted in something the modern world forgets to honor: endurance. For centuries, Africa has been cast aside, dismissed as the footnote of global history. Its people enslaved, its treasures stolen, its voice silenced. And yet, like a candle that refuses to go out in the wind, its faith remained. Ethiopia, in particular, stood as a paradox. A nation never colonized, yet deeply wounded. A kingdom that held on to sacred books while its neighbors burned theirs. A people who fasted, prayed, and kept the Sabbath. Not because it was fashionable, but because it was covenant. Psalm 66:10 says, "For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver." And perhaps no verse better captures the soul of African Christianity. Because for many Ethiopians, and for millions in the African diaspora, suffering is not proof of divine absence. It is proof of divine preparation. Slavery, colonialism, exile, all of it in their theology was a refining fire, a purification not just of identity, but of purpose. In one of Ethiopia's lesser-known apocalyptic texts, The Mysteries of Heaven and Earth, there was a prophecy. The light of God shall return to the land of the blacks, and the valleys shall shine before the nations. It's not a statement of revenge, it's a promise of return. And if you look closely, you'll see that this idea didn't stay confined within Ethiopia's borders. In the 20th century, across the Atlantic, a spiritual revolution began to stir. The Rastafarian movement, born in Jamaica but rooted in Ethiopian prophecy, declared Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia, to be a messianic figure. To some, he was Christ returned. To others, the forerunner of what's still come. When Selassie was crowned in 1930, he received titles pulled straight from Revelation: King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah. The world saw a political ceremony, but those who knew the scriptures saw a sign. Even Selassie himself, though humble and devout, understood the weight of what he represented. He said, "I am but a man. My loyalty is to Christ," but his bloodline traced back to Menelik, to Solomon, to David. That's why Ethiopia's claim isn't built on fantasy. It's built on history, covenant, and the pain that shaped both. And here's the question that lingers like smoke after the flame. What if Africa's suffering was never punishment, but preparation? What if its spiritual hunger, its sacred memory, and its blood-soaked soil are not signs of loss, but signs of readiness? In Part 5, we go even deeper. Because what if Zion, the temple, the place of divine presence, is not waiting to be rebuilt, but is already alive, carved in stone, beating in rhythm with the prayers of the faithful? What if the third temple has already been built? Not in Jerusalem, not out of limestone or marble, but carved straight into the body of the earth, hidden in the Ethiopian highlands, where faith has outlasted empires. The Western world looks toward the Middle East for signs: temple reconstructions, red hears, ancient stones. But in Ethiopia, they aren't waiting. They believe the temple is already here, living, breathing, worshipped. And if you want to see it, you don't look up, you look down. In the mountain town of Lalibela, 11 churches have been carved directly into solid rock, not built above ground, but chiseled from below. Each one formed by hand, by faith, by prophecy. No mortar, no scaffolding, no steel, just vision and stone. Legend says they were built by angels who worked through the night. But history tells us they were carved during a time of invasion when Ethiopia faced pressure to abandon its Christian identity. Instead, they dug deeper. These churches weren't constructed to impress the world. They were created as a sanctuary, a place where heaven could dwell on earth, even if the rest of the world forgot. To Ethiopian Christians, this is Zion, not a place of power, but of presence. Psalm 68:31 reads, "Ethiopia shall soon stretch forth her hands unto God." This verse is not recited as poetry. It's chanted as prophecy because Zion in Ethiopian theology isn't confined to a single location. It is wherever God chooses to dwell, and they believe He has chosen them. This belief is not symbolic, it's expressed through action. Ethiopian Christians still observe Old Testament festivals like Si, a day of repentance and covenant renewal. Standing atop mountains, hands lifted toward Jerusalem, remembering the exile, but honoring their role in the return. They eat foods that follow kosher-style laws. They speak prayers in Giz, a language older than Latin. They don't read the Bible as an imported book. They sing it as part of their bloodline. Theirs is not a religion of reformation. It's a living covenant, one that bridges the old and the new, Judaism and Christianity, not by erasing one, but by fulfilling both. And here's what makes their theology so powerful. While the world chases miracles in ruins and relics, Ethiopians believe that God never left. He just relocated from empire to endurance, from cathedral to carved rock, from ceremony to covenant. So, let me ask you, what if Zion isn't something to be built, but something to be remembered? In Part 6, we will follow that memory all the way to its conclusion, into the boldest claim of all that Christ will not return to a throne in the West, but to a mountain in Africa. What if Christ doesn't return from the sky, but from the soil? Not through Roman ships, not through the gates of Jerusalem, but through the highlands and valleys of Africa, where his presence was never forgotten, only hidden. That's the prophecy whispered across Ethiopia. And it's not new, it's not trendy. It's ancient, preserved in chants, in scrolls written in geese, and in the trembling silence of monks who have guarded it for centuries without ever speaking his name in vain. Because in the Ethiopian worldview, the return of Christ is not an event imposed from the outside. It is a revealing from within. Let that sink in. While the Western Church waits for clouds to part and trumpets to sound, Ethiopia believes the Messiah's path leads through them, through their covenant, their calendar, their suffering, and their soil. And they point to prophecy as proof. In the little-known text, The Mysteries of Heaven and Earth, a line appears rarely translated outside Ethiopia. The light of God shall return to the land of the blacks, and the nations shall bow to the mountain of his dwelling. To many, this confirms it that Ethiopia, long seen as peripheral, is in fact central to the divine plan, not just in history, but in what's still to come. This belief isn't limited to Ethiopia. Across the African diaspora, from Jamaica to Harlem, echoes of this theology have awakened generations. In the Rastafarian tradition, Haile Selassie was not just a king, he was the Lion of Judah. His coronation was not just political, it was prophetic. And although he denied divinity, saying, "I am but a man, my loyalty is to Christ," his bloodline traced to Solomon, and David spoke louder than any throne. In 1936, when Selassie stood before the League of Nations after Mussolini's invasion, his words weren't just diplomatic. To many, they sounded like the lament of a prophet, ignored, dismissed, just as Christ was before his crucifixion. And Ethiopia, bloodied but unbowed, became a symbol of divine endurance. Even its calendar, running years behind the West, speaks of a different time, a divine time. Some say when Ethiopia's timeline comes full circle, the world will finally understand, because maybe Christ doesn't return when we expect. Maybe he returns when the right people are ready. And Ethiopia has been getting ready for over 2,000 years. Through fasting, through chants sung under star-filled skies, through churches carved into rock, and scrolls kept in shadow, they've been preparing not for a spectacle, but for a homecoming.